Jamaica Plain is known for cutting-edge food businesses combining a global assortment of menus with a distinct local flavor. A little more than a year ago, a group of restaurants asked their customers to support a new and more inclusive way of paying for service. It's a 3% hospitality administrative fee. To tell us how the experiment has been working out are the owners of the restaurants Tres Gatos, Center Street Cafe, and Casa Verde. We'd like to welcome Keith Harmon and David Doyle. Thank you both for very much being with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Right. Keith, I want to start with what this fee is, the hospitality administrative fee. It's a mouthful. What does it do exactly?
It is. So, what it really is a revenue sharing program where we take top line revenue and direct it 100% and completely to improve kitchen compensation. And the reason it's necessary is that after working on it for a long time, it's the simplest possible solution to a very complicated problem where you have tipped and non-tipped employees working in the same business model. And there was, Danny Meyer came out with his hospitality included policy that eliminated tipping entirely, and as part of that dialogue, he mentioned that front of house tipped dining room compensation has gone up 200% in the last 20 years, but kitchen back of house compensation has only gone up 25%. And there's an accounting phenomena that makes that happen, in that every time we raise prices for any reason, latex gloves, insurances, rent, doesn't matter, the servers are elicited a bump in their compensation because people tip on the total price, but the back of house stays at the same level. And so you need a way to make back of house compensation also track to top line revenue, and you need to do it legally and in a transparent way. And this, after talking about it for a long time, we decided this was the most straightforward way to not only close the wage gap between what tipped employees and non-tipped employees make, but close it in such a way that any future price increases or as the restaurants get busier, everyone is tethered to the top line revenue, and it really it aligns front and back along with owners with all the same mission, which is to offer the best experience possible and grow the business in terms of revenue over time, and now everyone benefits from that.
David, a lot of outsiders might think that a good restaurant is basically infrastructure with one chef who knows what he or she is doing, but you know the inside of this. So why is the back of the house and their compensation so important?
Well, first of all, right now there's a shortage of talented chefs and cooks in Boston and a lot of cities. So I think with last year there were a lot of exciting restaurant openings across Boston. These restaurants all need really talented people to produce excellent food. And we felt strongly that, first of all, the disparity in income was something that we just felt had to be addressed. But as far as retention goes, as far as building a team that can build a solid reputation for a restaurant, you really do need to have cooks and chefs that are with the team for a while to be able to trust each other, to be able to communicate effectively with the rest of the team. And we've definitely noticed an improvement in retention. We feel like this is definitely going to help us keep people in the kitchen for longer.
Now, you make this sound a little bit like a championship team going into the playoffs here. How important is that for a restaurant? I guess you're not just cranking out the same thing over and over again automatically, right?
I actually really like the team metaphor because I feel that the restaurants that operate at a really high level, and we're trying to be that kind of restaurant that offers great food but also great service. A lot of the elements of a great dining experience that are not obvious are related to how the place feels. And Keith and I talk about this a lot with our teams. One of the things that diners pick up on, that our guests pick up on, when you come into a room, you get a sense of not only the music in the room, the decor, the lighting, but you also get a sense of how the team is operating. And it's hard to put your finger on, but we all know that feeling of going into a restaurant where everyone's happy to be there, where communication between front of house and back of house is smooth. Service just runs better. If there are any issues with food, those issues are resolved quicker. It's a palpable thing that you can feel at a restaurant when a team is is working really smoothly.
And I'd like to just add in there that it's all about the people. Like, our success is entirely defined by the quality of people that we're able to work with. And so the more we can do to get the right people, keep the right people, treat them well, allow them to have lives that support families and allow room for personal growth. Like, it's all about the people. You can't succeed without a great team. You absolutely have to start there.
This is BNN News. We're talking about new fees for service at restaurants in Jamaica Plain with Keith Harmon and David Doyle. Keith, I guess one of the things that people will want to know is if they're really getting what they're paying for with this extra fee. And I guess, what does this mean in terms of pay for those people who are less visible in the restaurants and about your ability to retain them?
So to talk about the retention piece, for instance, we opened our newest restaurant, Casa Verde, in May, and we have only parted ways with 2 people in the kitchen since we opened, one of which was due to, unfortunately, really bad behavior, and the other of which deserved to have this great executive sous-level position that we didn't have room to offer him, and he went on to another great restaurant and moved forward in his career. So our retention across all 3 restaurants is through the roof, which is pretty unheard of when you're constantly reading about kitchen labor shortages. In terms of the compensation piece, I would mention there's a blogger named Patrick McGuire who we work with. He does a blog called Server Not Servant, and he actually laid out the 1-year results. But in a nutshell, across 3 restaurants, averaged out, it's an extra $2.87 per hour worked, and it's distributed, it's collected according to total sales and distributed according to hours worked. So that $2.87 an hour actually makes a much bigger difference to the dishwasher and the prep cook and the starting line cook, but everyone benefits from it. And for the salaried managers in the kitchen, that number translates on average to almost $6,000 a year in extra compensation. It varies by restaurant, so and that's actually one of the great things about it, is that it becomes a really great coaching tool to say, okay, well, these were the admin fees for January. They're a little bit less than they were in December, so where does that come from? Does that come from sales coming down? Does that come from inefficient scheduling? What can we do to maximize this compensation piece? Because now the back of house staff, taken over a longer time period, is a lot like the front of house staff, where they're solving the basic problem on their own. Like, how do we offer the best experience that generates the most revenue in a way that compensates us all to the highest level possible, that still delivers the experience we need to build the business into the future?
David, what about the customer reaction? This is not fast food, I know, but Jamaica Plain is not necessarily the wealthiest part of the city either. So what about the volume of customers, how they're tipping? What have you noticed?
Well, as far as how they're tipping, I would say one of our concerns right off the bat was, would there be a decrease in what our servers see in their tips? And that really didn't happen. Really, what's happening is that a lot of our guests are tipping on that total, which includes that 3%. So the server tips in general have gone up, if anything. So they definitely have not been adversely affected by this. Our guests themselves, that's probably one of the more gratifying things for both of us, because we feel very rooted in that community, is how well received it was by the majority of our guests. Many individuals actually just would come up to us or our managers and applaud the effort on the basis of just being a progressive thing to do that's trying to make a change in our individual workplaces, but hopefully maybe contribute to the wider industry as well. I think the perception was that it's a change that had to happen. We never claimed that it was the best or the only solution, but we felt that it was our best shot at it, and our guests, for the most part, have really been behind it. Really very little negative feedback for us directly in the restaurants.
I want to put some numbers to this, in the sense that, at this point we're 13 and a half months in, and when I closed December, we've had about 100,000 guests come through the 3 restaurants in that time, and we've had 12 to 15 complaints about the fees, none of which were severe, none of which were angry, none of which were, I can't believe this. So in the restaurant, I think it's been, almost the complete absence of negative responses. And as David said, far more often you get, so many people, their first jobs were in a restaurant, either back or front. Everyone who works in this industry knows that this has been a problem for a long time. So you have this really, really large group of people that have worked in restaurants, and they know this was a problem, and they look at it and they're like, I'm so glad you're addressing this. And JP especially is a great community to do that in. And after releasing those results through Patrick's blog and doing some internal communications and whatnot, we've seen just in the last 2 months, Puritan and Company has rolled out an admin fee. Commonwealth Kitchen in Cambridge has rolled out an admin fee. Bar Mazzana has rolled out an admin fee. Tavern Road has rolled out an admin fee. I'm talking to other restaurants that are interested in it. There's a restaurant in San Diego that did it. And so, down the chain of what we were trying to do, the first thing was to look after our own teams. The second thing was to try and move the industry forward, because that's our life's work. This is what we really want to do. And to see it being adopted by other restaurants that we have a tremendous amount of respect for respect of your peers is that's everything. That's why we go to work.
Yeah, I do want to ask about some negative comments that emerged during the election year. They had practically nothing to do with this fee, but they do tell a story about your rapport with the neighborhood. Tell us a little bit about that, maybe an episode.
I was actually out of town, so you got the initial
the Trump troll gangs up on Center Street Cafe, I think?
Yeah, Center Street Cafe. So, by definition, we're feedback junkies, right? So we get notifications whenever we get a review, and we're always asking, how did you like it? What can we do better? What could be different next time? So there's one night, my phone goes off. There's a Facebook review. It's really negative. I'm looking at that, and then it goes off again. There's a second one, and then I'm reading that, and it starts to get the text of that second negative review is really crazy. And so within about 45 minutes, 10 or 12 really, really nasty negative Facebook reviews came into Center Street Cafe. And it turned out that it revolved around one of our cooks on his personal Facebook page had posted a video of a Trump rally that was quite obviously a white supremacist event. And because on his Facebook page, he's proud to work at the cafe, they found out he worked at the cafe, and they started making these really lewd and inappropriate reviews that called him out in all sorts of negative ways. So, that's deeply disturbing because people, it's a digital age, so a lot of times your first impression is a Facebook review or a Yelp review, and that's fine, we embrace it. So the next day, I got up and I'm getting ready to go about my day, so I put a quick thing on my Facebook page. Well, this is how my day's starting. This happened, and now the cafe is just getting assaulted with all these crazy negative reviews. And there's a local, industry superstar named Misty Kalkofen, and another guy named Seamus Moynihan that is part of the group that runs JP Music Fest, which we love and have been supporters of for a long time. They shared it, and it turned into this viral thing, and the whole neighborhood, within, I think, 48 hours, we had 300 or 350 five-star reviews. And it was incredibly heartwarming to watch our guests, our neighborhood, the people who knew what we're actually doing in the restaurant. I guess I didn't really feel bad for them, but I felt bad for them a little bit, because what started with this really negative assault turned into our very progressive and tight-knit neighborhood just incredibly rallying around the cafe. And that's our mission, is to be a big part of the neighborhood. But when you see something like that, it confirms that you're on mission. And it turned into a really heartwarming event, even though when it started it was terrifying.
Dave, I'm going to leave one little footnote, which also was about this sort of organic nature of these businesses in the neighborhood. I remember when Tres Gatos used to be Roseway Bookstore, and it's morphed into something else, but it's still sort of a bookstore too.
It definitely is, and we actually talk about the early days. So Roseway was the bookstore that preceded. So Tres Gatos was a bookstore that my brother and I started. We moved to Roseway Books, became friends with the owner of Roseway, and moved our bookstore Rhythm and Muse in there, and that eventually became Tres Gatos. But a lot of the regulars at the store, at the back of the restaurant, go back to the early days of Rhythm and Muse. And I think I actually credit a lot of our stronger relationships with the community to that bookstore, which was a very community-based kind of business. And I think that philosophy has been a huge part of how we form our mission statements for these restaurants. And going back to the fee a little bit, I think part of the reason that so many of our guests embraced that mission is because wrapped up in the whole goal of trying to pay our back of house crews more fairly is our commitment to stand by our mission, which is supporting local farmers, supporting local nonprofits like the JP Music Fest, spontaneous celebrations. So we feel that that's a huge part of our mission. And when people say, why don't you just pay your guys more, it's a finite supply of money, and we don't want to choose to run our restaurants differently. We want to make sure that the giving back to the community is a big piece of that. So I think the early bookstore roots in the community continue to produce fruit for us in the community.
Thank you both very much. David Doyle and Keith Harmon from the 3 restaurants in Jamaica Plain.